Well, hello, everybody. Happy Halloween. My name is Sarah Tinsley. I am Litho's product marketing manager. And thank you so much for joining us today for our October webinar. We are going to be exploring creative automation within creative operations. This is a great picture I love of my brothers and I. We grew up in Knoxville, Tennessee, and we're very, very close. A lot of that is because we're super close in age. My brother, who's there in the blue, Jordan, he is about 14 months older than me. And my other brother, Carter, there in the red, is about 16 months younger than me. So we are a tight knit bunch. And growing up, we did pretty much everything together. We were always kind of in the same life stage together, had a similar group of friends. And so we palled around quite a bit. My brothers didn't appreciate how kind of slowly I moved through the world. Maybe we'd be, walking to a friend's house. Back in the 80s, you would just walk around your neighborhood, knocking on your friend's door, seeing who was home, who might be able to come out and play. And I would always be like half a block behind them when we were on our way to like Robert's house or to Bess's house. And they were always having to wait for me to catch up. Maybe we were walking around the shopping mall and, I was still in a store that they had long since moved on from. They had to come back and find me and kind of keep me together with the group. So it was a little bit of an inconvenience for them. But I don't necessarily think it was because I was like a really slow walker. I wasn't paying attention. I tend to be quite the daydreamer. I still am. And especially as a little girl, I was just really curious about the world that I was growing up in. And I really loved engaging my imagination. So oftentimes I was moving slowly because I was just absorbing the environment that was around me. I wasn't interested necessarily in being efficient and getting where I wanted to be as quickly as I could get there. I find myself now falling into that trap more often that I'd like as an adult, but as a little kid, I really just enjoyed being present where I was and just taking in what was around me. As I said to my brothers, it wasn't that great. It was a little inconvenient for them. I was a bit of a nuisance probably in that space. And you can imagine in 1989, when my family, our parents surprised us with a family trip to Disney World in Florida, it was an actual conversation point as we were planning for that trip, and our parents were trying to help us, manage our expectations about going to Disney World. They had shelled out some pretty good hard-earned cash for that trip, and so they really wanted to make the most of it. And part of that conversation for kind of pre-planning was, Sarah, you really got to keep up with us. We're going to have a lot to do. We have an agenda. You're just going to have to pay attention. Really, please keep up with us so that we can do everything that we want to do. We don't want you to get lost. We don't want you to fall behind. That approach really wasn't going to work for me because Disney World, it's magic. It's the most magical place on earth. And I learned as a young girl that Sarah, the name Sarah, is the Hebrew word for princess. And so I just kind of immediately adopted this idea that obviously I am predestined for royalty here. It's in my name. I'm going to be a princess. And so Disney World was kind of this early in life fulfillment of my destiny. I really thought that this was going to be a pretty life-changing experience for me. I might get recognized. I might immediately get pulled into an exhibit, a parade, a costume. I mean, I had pretty high hopes for this trip to Disney World. And so I wasn't interested in efficiently making my way through the different villages and the whole park. I really wanted to take my time. I didn't want to rush my destiny. I wanted to memorize all the details. I wanted to see, every tile, every curtain, every crown, every train, all of the costumes, all of the buildings. Everything there was so magnificent, and it just, lit up my imagination as I started to picture myself living in this fairy tale land. It was really inspiring. And at that point, everything else to me was kind of meaningless. I didn't want to be rushed through the magic of this wonderful place that I had ended up in. getting this glimpse into what maybe my future was going to look like as a fairy tale princess. But that's just not the way it works. And I find myself now as a creative professional feeling like I am constantly rushing through the creative part of my operations, of my job. I'm always late for a very important date. There's no time to say hello or goodbye. I'm late. We don't have time anymore to really breathe through creative inspiration. We need to get our work done. You have this amount of work to do and you have this amount of time to get it done. And that's just kind of what dictates our creative lives and our creative operations and how we've structured our processes in so many ways. When thinking through this presentation, I had this idea of like big deadline pop up into my head. You've heard of probably like big pharma or big tobacco or big oil. And I think in this creative industry, we are oftentimes surrendering to big deadline because our ability to meet our stakeholders' needs within the predetermined scope of time is a measurement of our success. And so we have this work, and if we get it done on time, then we're successful. So oftentimes that's how we're measured. And so we surrender to big deadline. Big deadline becomes, the priority or maybe a prioritized metric in how we measure our success. But here at Litho, we really believe that creativity takes time and creativity takes space. And the creative part of your processes is the last place that you want to cut corners, because creative with a capital C, is like the human element of marketing. Like you are the creative because it's the humanity. You are the human that's bringing real perspective, real imagination, real life circumstances to the work that you're doing. You're bringing the humanity to marketing that ultimately is going to connect with that audience. You're bringing the emotion that is hopefully going to drive them to make a decision and to act, and for your business to grow because you've connected with this audience in a way that is very human to human. It's why when we hear about artificial intelligence and ChatGPT and even creative automation, there's a little bit of fear that comes in. It kind of seeps into creative professionals and our confidence a little bit. But it's not a fear that we really need to give much energy to, because AI and machines, they can't have experiences. They can't imagine something that isn't concrete known to them already, but you can do that. And so that humanity is what we really, really need to protect, because the humanity is your creativity. And I don't want creativity to become efficient. I don't want to have to live and drain my creativity on a schedule. It just doesn't work that way. You're not really inspired on a schedule. You can't just cast a magic spell and summon creativity like the second you need it. I did not include this in the dry run I did with my boss, Molly. So Molly, sorry. But I ended up putting this presentation together in like the last 72 hours. I had planned on working on it quite a bit over the last 2 weeks, but things just got kind of crazy. I ended up being in Dallas for a wedding, which is something I planned on doing. Then I ended up extending that stay in Dallas for a funeral, not something I had planned on doing. And then my in-laws came in town, something I knew about. So I had this plan, this schedule about when I was going to work on this. I knew I had some, known impacts that could derail my ability to be productive. But then I had some unforeseen events pop up that kind of scrambled this great plan that I had. And over the last 3 days, I sat down so many times on my computer being like, okay, let's flesh this out. Let's get this going. You can do this. And after like 10 minutes, I'd be like, well, let's see what's going on Instagram. Or I wonder about this or that. And finding all of these distractions, because that inspiration just wasn't quite hitting me. But as I have the process and I stuck to my process, and eventually it all started to come together. But I had to give myself time. I had to give myself space for this presentation to start gelling and for it to make sense. I'm really hoping that it gels and it makes sense for you guys too. So instead of rushing and rushing and rushing the way I feel like we are always with stuff we feel like we operate, we're always on hyper speed, is that now we have tools that help us evaluate our processes and the way we've been doing things and the people that we have included in our processes so that we can improve the way we produce creativity, the way we translate our creativity into deliverables that actually go to market. And this is where creative automation steps in. Creativity takes time, it takes space, and creative automation can help us be more efficient in the production side of creative operations. So we know that production, there's room for improvement. There are decisions that we've made in the past that maybe need to evolve. We have new tools, we have new understandings, we have new team members. So we constantly need to evolve the way we're working. And in order to protect our creativity, I think it's really wise to look at the way you take your creative concepts and how you actually deliver them to your stakeholder. And so by bringing creative automation in to really address the production side of your creative operations, you're taking on like a really good competitive edge. You're really embracing the idea of improvement. You're embracing new technology. You're recognizing that the creative world around us, the marketing world around us, in general, the world around us is changing and evolving, and we have to stay relevant, and we need to take advantage of new technologies, new tools, new resources that help us do what we do best. And so we need to embrace creative automation. I promise you, your competitors are. And so this is a stepping stone where it really, if this is something that doesn't seem relevant to you or it seems too intimidating, really encourage you to take a step back and start small, thinking about ways, really understanding your business. Where do things take too long? Where are you constantly rushing? Where are ways that you'd like to improve? Maybe metrics that you're measured against that ultimately decide your departmental success. Are there areas for improvement there? Is there a way for creative automation to step in and supplement the work that you do? Not to overtake, not to absorb, but really to augment. This is a tool that can come alongside you and make your work a lot easier and a lot better. So by taking advantage of these new great technologies, we're measurably improving our processes and our operations. We're going to get to that word measurably in a little bit because it's a really, really big one. It's one that will press your boss if you have this conversation with them. So thinking about creative automation, let's look at it tactically for a second. What's popping up on our screen here is a typical creative operations flow, your typical creative content life cycle. And that big box in the middle there, that's the production process. That's the big chunk of creative operations where creative automation can really step in and have a massive impact. We see here that we've got kind of like this, it's almost like a bunch of Russian nesting dolls where you've got like a process within a process within a process, and there's all these like cycles that are going on within each other. And that doesn't have to be that way. We don't have to have this redundancy. We don't have to have the bloat that we see a lot on our creative operations. I can tell you at LIFO, we have a marketing team, we have a creative team, and we're better understanding what are ways that we can streamline production so that we can make time for the more important, more strategic work that ultimately is going to help us drive that growth, that's going to justify the excellence of our creative team. So when we look at this production process and we see all of these kind of manual and repetitive steps, we know that each of these stages is competing on time against your creative process, because you ultimately have a predetermined timeline to get your work done, something that you've agreed upon with your stakeholder. This is the scope of the work. This is how long it's going to take us. You get everything done on this date. So every step along the way is competing with the initial creative process. When that brief comes in and you start to conceptualize and bring forward designs. So you work through your brainstorming, your different iterations, you ultimately land on your perfect concept with your expert design. From there, we head over into the production side, and that's where we're starting to look at breaking down this prototype we've created during the creative process and thinking about, okay, how is this actually going to be deployed? We're going to print this. What are the different print specs that we need to offer up for our stakeholders? This is going to go digital as well. What are the different digital formats that we need to come up with and develop? You know, there's all these different size guides. So you start coming up with all of your different versions of your original prototype, how it's going to be distributed, how it's going to be modified in order to meet all of these different specs that come in. And this is something that presently your creative team is probably handling. It's manual work. Once you get all of that broken out, you hit a review and approval cycle to make sure that everything is scaling the way you want it to, that the elements are being positioned and floated in the ways that you want them as those specs start to change. You want to make sure that you're maintaining your brand standards and you know, your excellence standards as you move through versioning. At some point, there's probably going to be some sort of file maintenance, some sort of file hygiene taking place where you're storing native files, or maybe you have a process for managing working files across a team. There's a matter of, you know, getting those files where they need to be, communicating to the right people where those files are, and then eventually, you know, giving them access to use those files. And then we move into the last part of the process, which is the personalization. And this is where we attempt to meet the exceedingly increasing demand that we see from what the world, from our audience, what our customers want from us. Everybody wants to be marketed to as an individual. You cannot just release these blanket messages and expect people to latch onto it. You have to get specific. You have to really know your audience. And so that's this hyper personalization, customization that's being demanded of creative and marketing teams right now. And it's becoming increasingly difficult to meet that demand, to be able to deliver all of the different creative assets that you really need to be successful, and to do it in a reasonable amount of time, and to do it to the best of your ability, where you really are bringing your absolute best to the creative process so that it can be improved upon as different iterations come through. Then probably hitting another approve cycle to make sure that everything is staying on brand and according to the designer's expectations, stakeholders' expectations as well. And then finally, we get to delivering those final assets to your team. So as I said, this is the production side of things looks really bloated here. There's a lot of steps here that we can streamline, that we can simplify, that we can automate. And we do that through creative automation. So you can see here, this new creative automation flow, it's so much more simple. It's a really slimmed down model of creative operation. It's because we've plugged in place of our big production chunk, we've now plugged in creative automation. We're going to talk more about Litho Tempo, which is our creative automation tool that we launched recently that absorbs this work. But in general, this is where creative automation is stepping in and really making your operations smart. We folded in creative operations to cover the scaling of your original prototypes. You can, instead of creating the prototype in your creative process and then creating all of those versions and then creating all of the personalizations, instead you create one template. And from that one template, all of those various, potentially infinite variations can be derived. So we're creating more time here by simplifying how much time it's going to take, how many resources are involved, how many people are involved. We're simplifying with creative automation, really debloating the production side of things, which gives the creative process way more space to breathe. You're absorbing that time to make sure that you're giving yourself the time and the space to bring the best idea, to best understand what your audience wants to hear, to actually engage with those advertising pieces that you're putting out. We're creating more time for creativity, which is lovely, which is awesome, which is something that we always want. We don't want creativity to always have to be super efficient. But there's a flip side to this coin as well. And we're also really making significant process improvements. And while talking about like the love of art is obviously the most fun part, when we talk about our jobs as creatives, we also know that creativity is a business. It's just bottom line. Creativity is a business. It's why we succumb to big deadline. But as we begin to understand how creative automation can really be this great tool to mature our processes, we're displaying this shift in kind of business perspective and understanding that, yes, having time to be more creative, to be more inspired, that's wonderful and that's good. And that's what we want as creatives. But as we go up the ladder, we also need to justify value to our leadership. And this is where this strategic understanding of creative automation can really impress your boss, because you are coming with a business perspective of, we want to streamline, we want to simplify, we understand that there's bloat here and that we can address that. We can get better assets to the market as quickly as possible. We can adjust those assets. We can run A/B testing, way more efficiently. We can get real-time feedback and make real-time adjustments. The stakeholder can actually go in and tweak the message without having to re-involve the creative team to walk back through our entire creative operations schedule again. So really being able to stand creative automation as an enhancement to how your business operates elevates you as a team member, of stepping outside of just a creative space, but really into that operational space, that strategic space, because you are no longer the machine. Previously, you were the machine. You were doing all of this work to get it done. But now with creative automation, you go from being the machine to operating the machine. And ultimately, we want to be able to deliver our best work, our best ideas, so that once they're plugged into the machine, that they're only elevated by the collaboration that's going to happen next. When we fold in, we invite other people to come in and participate in creative production, because the creative team is no longer solely responsible for the design, the content, the management, the updating, the revisions. We're inviting other people to come in, trusted stakeholders, to be a part of that process. And collaboration is a huge, it's a huge element, but it's also a huge advantage of creative automation. So when I was a creative manager for a membership association in Fort Worth, Texas, we had a phrase in amongst my team that we generally used behind closed doors when it was just, and we were in a safe space, and it's usually accompanied with like an eye roll, or maybe, some sort of some sarcasm, or maybe a forced smile. And we would say, well, everyone can color, when we get some feedback that was maybe like debatable in our minds. Like someone would say, I think that blue should be a little brighter. Oh, well, everyone can color. And it's true, everyone can color. Everyone has their own ideas, right? But you're the designer, you're the expert. You've been trained to do this, you're paid to do that. You're going to take that feedback no matter what. And as I've been thinking about creative automation, I have kind of this new take on this phrase, well, everyone can color. And I've come to understand it as like a far more optimistic phrase, where it's like, oh, everyone can color. And creative automation is really ushering us into this new phase of collaboration where everyone gets to participate in creative production, which is something that most people think is really, really fun. They think that's pretty cool. They want to get their hands dirty and to live in the creative space, and to say that they contributed to this really, really cool piece of art that ultimately is going to be delivered out for a business purpose. And so by building a template and inviting people to come in and pick the right pieces that you've made available to them so that they can fulfill their specific need, you're inviting them to come in and color. And creative automation embraces collaboration as this trusted avenue to excellence. It's bringing all the experts together to make your work really pixel perfect. Oftentimes when you're going through and creating like your prototype where all of these variations and variants are going to come from, like, okay, you're going to need maybe 6 or 7 different CTAs that are going to, resonate with different target audience segments that your marketing team has identified for this particular product. Or maybe you're an international company and you need a language expert to come in and to be part of the production process to make sure that as you're going out to these different countries, you're using the right language. Maybe you need regional leadership to come in and, to layer in their expertise of, their specialized understanding of their particular audience, their particular geographic region. And you want them to come in and be able to advise on images, on color schemes, on messaging, on call to actions. So we're creating this space where the creative team doesn't have to be responsible for all of that work anymore. It's a much more collaborative space because we're giving stakeholders the authority to layer in that expertise on your design expertise. And ultimately, the hope is that everybody's contribution is elevated and that the absolute best from you, from your stakeholder, from your marketing team is delivered. And when combined together, you're creating work that just would be impossible if you were trying to do it all on your own. And we can't totally forget about my original pessimistic take on everyone can color, because when you're inviting new stakeholders in, new colleagues to come in and to actively participate, where they get to have their hands-on experience with the production of creative assets, you might be thinking there's a fear of maybe a little bit of risk kind of seeping into that process. That's a legitimate fear. But if you pick the right creative automation tool, I suggest you look at Lithotempo first. You'll find that within Tempo, the creative team really is still operating the machine. So you are in control of how your stakeholders get to come in and participate. They may have access to certain elements to swap out an image. They may not have access, to other elements. Maybe they can't touch the logos. Or you've prescribed, very specific color schemes that they can work within. Because you may think in your head, and if you've been in the creative world, for long enough, something has left your office or you've seen it out in the market and you think, I didn't do that. Nobody on my team did that. How in the world did that get out there? Sometimes things go rogue. And when you don't have a good relationship with your stakeholders, when you don't collaborate well with them, they can go and try and do things on their own. So you may think that you've got like this very easy to follow, very clearly defined instructions about how you want someone to interact. But if you don't have more control or you don't have the ability to give final approval, you might end up with an actual asset that is nothing like what you had envisioned in your mind or what you had detailed out in the instructions. And so you want to be sure as you're exploring creative automation that you pick a tool like Tempo that keeps everyone in their lane of expertise, that you still get to be the creative team that's controlling the machine. There's absolutely an appreciation for guardrails to ensure that every contributor is really giving their expertise that you're soliciting from them. And ultimately, when we think about creative automation, it kind of boils down to the classic, like, teach a man to fish wisdom. If we'll paraphrase this, botch it probably, but if you give a man a fish, you feed him for one day. You teach a man to fish, he can feed himself, for eternity. And so there's this idea of, instead of like the creative team having to do all the versioning, all the personalization work, instead of the creative team having to feed the marketing team every single day, instead, we're going to empower the marketing team and our stakeholders to come in and to learn how to fish, to learn how to engage in creative production. And it ultimately just boils down to, it's a self-service model where stakeholders don't need to reach out to the creative team as often, because the creative team has set them up with this repeatable path to success where they can go in the second they recognize they need an asset. They can easily hop into a template, make the changes that they need, export the perfect file that they need and get that asset to market as quickly as possible. Again, really never having to touch the creative team workload or make a request. So things are getting to market much, much faster, and the creative team isn't having to lift a finger. We have a case study out from the American Cancer Society, and nearly 95%, they saw a decrease in one-off requests coming through the creative team after they adopted creative automation. So through this blending of machine and art, we've bred flexibility and new ways of accomplishing creative work. We're showing that we understand the greater business around us, the greater marketing and industry and creative industries around us, and we're willing to evolve. Not only willing, like recognizing that a change needs to be there, and then proactively seeing how your team can take advantage of new technologies to help you evolve. We're empowering other individuals who maybe don't have any sort of design background or experience to come in and to still be a valued member of the creative process. By inviting your stakeholders in, to really be active participants, there is an extension of trust there. And that's invaluable when you think about your internal relationships and nurturing that stakeholder relationship so that, the work you do is mutually beneficial, that it is inspiring and satisfying for you as the creative, and that it helps them meet, their business goals. And so don't underestimate the value of being an investor in your team when you're able to recognize that there are other ways that we can bring other people into this process and empower them to, flex their expertise and get to show off the hard work that they're doing, that they have something just as important to contribute to, the final deliverable as you do. And that establishment of trust and confidence really goes a long way. And that's something your leadership is going to notice as well. And then we're also just able to meet these personalization needs. We're seeing an incredible increase in demand for how our audiences, how our customers want to be reached and want to be marketed to, and that is going to continue to adjust and change. We know that technology is it is advancing so quickly. Who knows what is going to be next and how quickly next is going to be here. But by tackling what we see in front of us, understanding the challenges we see in front of us, is we're able to meet that personalization demand. And so we can exceed our stakeholders' expectations. We can show how our team is advancing the company's bottom line. Because when you bring in creative automation, you are able to measure the impact of that tool. Right off the bat, you can think through, the amount of those one-off requests that come in, and really seeing your stakeholders be able to go out and generate those assets on their own, so that the creative team is focusing on different work, so that you're exceeding expectations. You're proving to your audience, to the external audience, and to your internal audience this value. So ultimately, what I'm really asking today is for you to consider, when it comes to creativity, just compromise elsewhere. It's important for us to slow down and to savor the creative process. We're here in this world. We've chosen to be creatives for a reason. And just the way the world has worked and evolved around us, it's moving at a different pace. And we don't always have the luxury now of waiting to be inspired to bring that A++ work, to every single project that comes across your desk. So when it comes to creativity, protect your craft, protect your art, protect your humanity. And you can do that through creative automation. You can compromise your production process. You can compromise how you engage with your stakeholders. You can give away a little bit of that control in order to really elevate the team as a whole. So when it comes to creativity, I really encourage you, compromise elsewhere and begin that compromising by exploring creative automation. So now I'll tell you about Tempo. Tempo is Litho's creative automation tool. We launched this in August at our customer conference, Lithopia, and we've received some really great interest and feedback from teams who really immediately see some value in bringing in creative automation. So when your team is ready to talk about evolving your businesses and keeping up with just like the insane market demand that's out there, let us know. And we would love to show you how Litho Tempo can be an excellent contributor to your business operations and your overall team success. We'd love to better understand your business so that we can help you strategize and find areas of improvement. Tempo is a part of our DAM. And so we'd also love to just show you the whole DAM in general, really our whole creative operations platform. You know, we cover from concept to completion, and we eliminate a lot of the confusion in order for you to get to that finish line. So if you're a customer, reach out to your CSM. Let them know that you attended this webinar today and that you're really interested in elevating your business and protecting your craft, but also improving your team's production. And we'd love to have that conversation. You can also email us at success@litho.com. If you are new to Litho and you're interested in exploring more about what we have to offer, you can book a demo with us on our website, litho.com. And then also following, we will send out a follow-up email that will have the recording of this session as well as contact information. So you can reach out to us, and we'd love to schedule a demo and to continue this conversation. So that wraps up the prepared portion of our time together. It looks like we've got 4 or 5 minutes left for questions. So let me pop over to my questions here. Okay. Oh, this is a good one. Okay. This is about avoiding some of that rogue asset creation. This question says, how do you ensure stakeholders still stay in their lane while giving them a chance to contribute in the creative process? So this can be accomplished really in a couple of ways. One, you really want to make sure that you've got open lines of communication, that there is an established process and expectation of who's responsible for what, who's contributing what, and also who has the authority. You know, when I was a creative manager, we also had a production manager. And if there was a question, a technical question, you know, about maybe grammar, our production manager, she was our technical expert. If there was a question about a design element or, you know, a specific color choice or image choice, our creative manager was the expert. So really knowing people, really understanding their roles and how to participate, really important. That's a big part of change management, something that Litho is also really passionate about, helping teams make changes. It's difficult. Change management can be really difficult. We have great resources that we could share with you in order to make sure that when people come in, they know how to participate. Also, a second part of that is when you're looking at your creative automation tool, ensuring that it is built with permissions in mind. Like I said, you are no longer the machine, you're operating the machine, and so you need to be in control. You want to make sure in Tempo, we have the ability to impact or to to limit what kind of engagement a stakeholder might have when they come into a template. You know, they may be able to change out some photos, they may be able to change out some text, but they may not be able to touch other elements of your template, so that you're ensuring only the right people are touching what really they have the ability to improve. Where have you solicited their input and their expertise? Lock them down into those areas. It helps keep them focused, and it helps keep things from, you know, going a little sideways. And then finally, you may want to consider having a final approval round built into the end of your creative automation process. In Tempo, we do have the ability to require an approval, even once an iteration has been made off of a template. So you still get to maintain control, and you get eyes on everything that leaves the desk, or that leaves your colleagues' desks before it goes out into the wild. Keeping things on brand, maintaining your reputation, maintaining that visual consistency that's so valuable to marketing and branding. I think we have time for maybe another question or two. I saw something earlier, and I will mention, yes, the session is being recorded, and we will share out the recording in an email. So keep your eyes peeled for that. Thank you so much for joining us today. Again, we would love to continue the conversation with you around creative automation where you see some value for your team. So please don't hesitate to reach out to us. Again, if you're a customer, hit up your CSM or email us at success@litho. If you're new to Litho, you can still email us. You can reach out to any of us, or you can go to our website and book a demo with us. And we'd love to better understand your business and hopefully offer some great ways to improve the way you do things and really how much you enjoy what you do. So thank you again for joining us. I hope everyone has a lovely and safe Halloween, and we'll catch you at the next webinar.